Everybody listening, this is Podlomatic. I think it's episode number 25. I'm talking to a gentleman named Pixel Trader. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm Pixel Trader. I've been a lot of things in my career so far. I started out doing web design, graphic design, things like that, but I've always had a love for comics. And about a year ago, I started a website called IndieCron, which helps fans of independent comics and creators kind of meet. I track crowdfunding campaigns from Indiegogo, and I list out about every 10 minutes it updates and pulls out the current details about the campaign, how much longer is available on it, things like that. But I've been a proponent of crowdfunding and creators and just trying to really help people get their word out and be a success. And I think I haven't done the numbers recently, but I think it's over $100,000 in the past year that or more that I've helped independent creators make. So it's been a good adventure so far.
The original vision of the website then would have been to archive both past and future projects to help all indie creators basically not only get their stuff funded, but was that the initial scope of the project, or did you want to break off and do other things as well with it?
The initial scope of the project it was pretty basic. So just for some history, for people that don't know, there was a spreadsheet called IndieCron initially. It was started by Edwin Boyette. It was hosted by John Delarose. Um, they it was just basically a Google spreadsheet. Had a few campaigns listed in it, and they used to go and update it maybe once or twice a day, something like that. It started to become very burdensome for them, and it would fall behind very quickly. But I saw that as a golden opportunity for people to be able to get more information about the campaigns, get links, and become kind of a focus point. Because all these people were asking, "Hey, how do I find what campaigns are currently funding?" All this kind of stuff. And so I went to Edwin and I'm like, "Hey, you guys are boomers. you know, you're definitely doing too much work here. I know automation, and in my current career, I build all kinds of automated technology stuff to be able to make life easier. And so what I'm doing here is I said, just give me a chance. Let me try to play with this thing and see what I can do. And a couple days later, I came back to him and I had the first revision of IndieCron built. And what it would do is it would go out to it would take the campaign information, that the list of all the campaigns that are currently active, and it would go out to Indiegogo, and it would pull back the information about the campaign, the basic information, just like how many backers there were, how much money they made, that kind of thing. And it existed like that for August, September, about 3 months. But I knew it could be more. And around October of last year, I launched the revision of the site, which was images and a few other extra bells and whistles, but it wasn't really what I wanted it to completely be. My big vision for it was to be more of a hub where you could get profiles for the creators, you get information about the campaign, you'd be able to see videos and news feeds and all kinds of stuff. And there's still things in the back of my mind that I would love to do with the site. I just have to find the time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the original scope was just to be a site to pull indie creators' content together and present it to people in an easy to find way. And yeah.
I remember I don't know if you've been following the history of like indie comics in America, especially. I've been sort of a loose student of it. Ever since, like, say, comics with an X at the end from the 70s, let's say. You got guys like R. Crumb, Harvey P. Carr, starting with those guys all the way to Jeff Smith on the series Bone. I always talk about him on the channel. All of those guys were self-financed, and they would only print a few dozen copies of their books and then maybe have them on sale in their local comics shops. Are Let's say IndieCron existed back then, would those have been the kind of guys that you would want to be on the site?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would have been obviously it's a whole different type of world, and I think it would have existed in a flyer form at that point. But yeah, absolutely. Uh, my entry into comics was towards the end of the '80s, early '90s, and so I missed Crumb and a few of the other guys. But Bone, I'm well aware of. But it's interesting because my exposure to independent comics, oddly enough, came from Wizard because they would promote little independent guys here and there in like really small pieces. They never really talked too much about them, but I was a hardcore image guy, so I didn't dive too far down the rabbit hole for indies until just recently, really. But yeah, I I would have loved to have done a newsletter or something like that back then. Those would have been the target audience. Um, the way IndieCron is, though, because it was built specifically for this purpose to help track crowdfunding, it exists in a kind of a different plane because there's still a lot of guys out there that are self-funding their books and are doing web comics and things like that, which aren't covered on our site as is. But there's something in the works, at least, which we covered a little bit. But there's something in the works that I'm trying to do with a few other people that's going to expand that view by tenfold.
And of course, I'm cheating for anyone listening. I already know what he's talking about, but we can circle around to that in a little bit. Let's rewind just a little. I'm curious to cover a little bit more of the history of indie comics in America, because I think that's our, despite all the differences with everybody, arguing on the internet, even left, right, center, politics, whatever, I think all of us are trying to make indie comics, or self-published comics, perhaps you could call it, thrive in America again. And there have been little sputters. I think historically speaking, we talked about Jeff Smith. His story fascinates me. If anyone's curious to see a documentary, it's called The Cartoonist. And it basically just covers how it was very brick and mortar. He just made his book. And I think he called every LCS in the whole country at some point and just got his book shipped to them. I don't know how much it cost him or if he made a loss on it at some point, but eventually he started earning money on it. But like indie comics in America has had these little peaks and lots of valleys. And of course, more recent years, I would say in the past 2-3 years, we've had an explosive peak, and it's been going up and up and up, up and down as well, but it's still in the positive, I would say. I guess what I'm trying to ask is, historically, do you think, because we're using social media, for instance, because there isn't so much of a local, I want to involve local comic shops, but we can bypass any middlemen where the customers can, as long as they know our names, look up, for instance, on IndieCron, oh, this is an indie creator who is selling their book. I would like to buy their book. Now that we're sort of bypassing those obstacles of, say, local obstacles, now that we're using the internet as a tool, do you think that this is the thing that indie comics needs to be a sustainable industry?
That's a really deep question because it's a rabbit hole, right? We look at the model right now. People are still self-funding their books. They're still going out and putting their time into them and printing themselves and taking them places and selling them. Uh, that model, I think, still works. Uh, Crowdfunding has been the big thing lately. But what I've noticed about crowdfunding is that the books tend to be more expensive than they should be. And the shipping costs and things like that tend to be more than they should be. And that's not gonna, in the long term, that's not gonna be sustainable. I want to be able to go out and collect maybe 10 books in a month, for instance. I mean, that's not a very big pull list compared to what I used to have, but if I wanted to collect 10 indie comics right now, I'm going to spend, and the delivery time, at least lately from what I've seen, is a lot higher than what it should be as well, but I'm going to spend hundreds. I think, like we talked off air earlier, a single campaign that I looked at earlier today, I was going to spend probably $50 just for a single book between the cost of the book and the shipping charges and whatnot. It's just not sustainable. Unless the product is a really amazing product, hardcover, and all this other stuff, it doesn't feel like it's worth it to me. And that's going to burn people out quickly. But I want to see indie comics grow, and I'm not sure the best method to do that. Print on demand has become one of those things that's pretty viable. Digital has become a huge success for a lot of these guys, where they'll go through and push a book through Comixology or another medium like that, and they'll do maybe 10 issues of a book and then bring it into a collected edition and sell that through a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo. I think that model's more sustainable. It gives people the ability to get their work out there, get paid for a digital version, not have to worry about the printing costs or overhead of doing these individual crowdfunding campaigns for little things like that. And then do something as an event type model where I've got my 10 issues pulled together into this really nice hardcover, embossed, glossy, whatever, just make super nice presentation for people. I think that's the way that these need to go for indie books.
So really, the big issue, the pattern, I suppose, is that customers can only afford to back a few of these books, as opposed to me going to the shop and I can buy 10 books for the price of two of these crowdfunded books.
Right now, yeah. Alterna, if people don't know, Alterna is a alternative indie creator publishing company. Actually, Peter Samedi is doing some amazing things with his pricing. It blows my mind. But when we were kids, comics were $1.75, $2 at most for most of them. And Peter, in this year, 2019, he's charging $1.50 to $1.75 or so for a comic book, and the quality is good. The only difference is he's using materials like in the 80s, like he's using newsprint, but the colors are still great, the stories are fantastic, and it's content I want to back. And if the creators that are doing these indie books and stuff want to form up a company like that, or are somehow able to print and do their distribution the same way that he does, it could be very viable. But we can't just depend on crowdfunding campaigns every couple of months for a single issue of a book, 20 some odd pages at $20. Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous to look at it like that. Yeah.
Do you think then there's been talk of creating publishing houses? Do you think that's on the horizon somewhere?
I think it is. Again, though, you have to have a group of people that are willing to work together, that are willing to rely on each other, that can get their schedules together. Yeah. And a majority of these campaigns that have launched in the past year, some of them have come through and made it on time, but a large number of them are closing in on a year and the books aren't done yet. I understand they're more than 20 pages or 30 pages. Most of them are clocking in around 50 to 80, somewhere in that range. But even then, not being able to get those pages and those books out in a timely manner, the reason that these companies make money, or like Peter Samedi is able to make money, is because he's able to print in vast quantities. Mm-hmm. The scale is what allows him to make money. And so if you've got one book that comes out 1 month and one book that comes out 12 months later, things like that, unless those guys can work together and get their timelines set up so they're printing everything at the same time and stuff, you're not really going to be able to get that scale to be able to make it profitable. So you kind of have to work with somebody that's already established. Mm-hmm. So I want to see publishing companies happen, and I have seen a few people stand stuff up, and I know there are some announcements that are coming fairly soon from some different creators that may address something like this. But it's a hard road to start.
Yeah, the sheer pace. Well, let's say, even as an indie creator doing my own stuff, the amount of plates that you have to spin at the same time is staggering. It's hard enough to just make a good book, and whether or not someone makes a good book is subjective. But just to make a book and release a book is hard enough. But then you have to do another 50% of the effort to make it a success is related to marketing. Letting people know that the project exists and keeping people interested, and then having people looking forward to the next book. It's almost a full-time job. So let's say my book Mary Sue here is, issues 1 and 2 is going to be releasing at some point, but then I need to think about issues 3, 4, and so on. I can't afford to just put out a couple books a year. This has to be a sustainable, repeatable thing. And I'm sure a million other creators in our circle are all struggling with the same thing. It's like, you can have one successful campaign, which is great, but then people are going to forget about you. What we really need is, in comics in general, you want to try to put out a book a month. That's full steam ahead speed. But that's almost, right now, for an indie creator, it's almost impossible. one book every 3 months, maybe, at our current pace. But you would be, that's like a breakneck speed.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, Yeah, and that's if the creator, like you said, is going full time. And a lot of these creators don't have the ability to do that.
Yeah.
So they're working full time jobs and then coming home and putting in another couple of hours each night to get their book ready.
Yeah.
Uh, that's kind of the same situation I'm in. I'm working 40 plus hours a week in my day job, and then I come home and I work from home a lot, but I, I switch gears and now I'm working on IndieCron
Sure.
and I'm working on my own projects that I want to launch. And yeah, that kind of speed, the only way you can do that is if you happen to have a windfall of some type, or you luck out and you have a good crowdfunding campaign that takes you, you know upwards to a couple $100,000 or something. But
Mm-hmm.
uh, I don't know how some of these guys are doing it, to be completely honest. I'm shocked when a campaign funds for like $3,000 only, $4,000, like how that's sustainable for certain people. And
You would have to live internationally. It's not sustainable, definitely in the United States, I don't think.
agreed, yeah, absolutely.
It's very interesting. I think, I mean, we talked about Image, and I watched a documentary on how Image came to be and how they kind of fell apart and how to create a sustainable publisher. One of the things that I've noticed as a pattern is they have to have flagship titles. And if you're
Mhm.
working as an independent creator, unless you strike gold with like the Jeff Smith thing, which I have to rewatch that documentary, how he did it. But it was such a hit that he was able to make it month to month and just focus on the book. And he printed it in black and white. That's another important thing that I
Yeah.
don't think a lot of people talk about. Printing in color is almost 4 times as expensive as black and white, as I'm finding out with my current project. But I guess flagship titles, you have to have like a Dragon Ball Z, let's say, leading and collecting all the money for your magazine, Shonen Jump in this example. And then you get a lot of smaller projects that maybe a lot of people don't love, but that's how you're able to pay those artists to pad out the magazine of Shonen Jump.
Hmm.
And on that note, actually, you talked about Wizard and all that stuff, and I mentioned earlier I'm cheating. Um, you're currently planning or talking about starting a magazine. Tell us about that.
Sure. So it's already underway. It's We're calling it Insider. It's INCITER. But originally the name of it was Insider, the INSIDER. But there's something similar to that already taken. But what it is a throwback kind of homage type thing to Wizard, because for a lot of us that grew up in the '90s or were around in that time reading those books and everything, it's a very very like nostalgia driven feeling. We see the indie stuff coming up and everything, and that whole scene was just explosive. It was vibrant. It was exciting, and we want to recapture some of that feeling to be able to promote books and comics and be able to get indie creators out to the masses. And so, Insider currently, I haven't done an count recently, but I think we've got about 15 people on the team right now. All volunteers, all just putting time into writing articles and creating content. We're making connections to creators that have books and stuff they want to promote, comic strips that they work on a regular basis that we may want to try to syndicate or something through our site. And so I've got a plane going overhead.
That's all right.
We're trying to do all of this to be able to help people to get out there. And that's the weirdest thing is I've never looked at like IndieCron or any of these other things I've done before. I've never looked at it as being something for profit. It's more like I just want to help people get their dreams made, because that's what I've always wanted. I've wanted somebody to come up behind me and say, "Hey, let me help you make this a success." And I'm in a position where I make good money with my work, and I have the time to dedicate to do a little bit of stuff on the side. So I'm able to just basically give this away to some degree. The magazine itself, it's going to be charged for, but the blog, it's 3 parts in total. We have a blog system, WordPress type thing. It's going to be a digital magazine. We've got a YouTube channel that we're going to stand up pretty soon. And then we have a printed edition, which will have a lot of the article stuff that you'll see on the website. But we're also holding back some of that content for the book. And then after the book has been out for, I don't know, 30, 60 days, something like that, we'll then integrate that content into the site.
I see.
But we're trying to capture that the nostalgia of having a tangible magazine type thing. It's probably going to be a little bit higher end than the newsprint type paper and stuff that was printed on.
Mhm.
But it's definitely it's a passion project. We're looking forward to getting it out in front of people.
Now I remember, well, I was a huge gamer as a kid, and I used to read magazines like Game Pro and all that stuff, and EGM. But I was never into Wizard specifically, but I imagine they were similar enough. What kind of content was in Wizard that really thrilled you and makes you want to bring that back?
The interviews were one of the biggest things for me. Interviews, giving the behind the scenes of how stuff is made.
Hmm.
That was the big part for me. It's like, okay, Jim Lee does this article, right? And they talk about, oh, here's his workspace, here's his desk. Oh my gosh, you get to see what Jim Lee's desk looks like, right? Oh,
Hmm.
look at the tools that he has on his desk. What are those? Breaking down different pieces of the people that inspire you, and getting a glimpse into their life and how they work. That's one of the biggest things I'm pushing for. And I've got this little idea which I'm I'm trying to pull together right now. I need to get a few lists pulled together, but we're actually going to talk to the creators about what their tools are and
Hmm.
what they would recommend, and create kind of like an Amazon shopping list type thing, so people can come in and say, "Oh, okay, use that type of ruler, use that type of pen." I'm sure you get that question a lot when you do your artwork. What tool is that? What program is that?
Hmm.
What ink do you use? Because people, unfortunately, a lot of people think the tool makes the artist, and it's really the other way around. If you're a good artist, you can use a stick and you can make an amazing piece of art.
Yeah.
But it's still nice to know what kind of tools your favorite artist uses. Um, yeah, but
Yeah, that actually gave me a little thrill as you were describing that, because I remember one of my favorite books as I was studying how to become a professional. I called it a manga artist, but it's all the same, right?
sure.
Um, I was my background's manga, if anyone doesn't know already, but there was a book called Manga Masters of the Art by, I think his name, Frederick Schote. I might be mistaken. Uh, but anyway, Manga Masters of the Art was just interviews with creators, and they talked about the process. What do you do when you get up in the morning? Even stuff like that. How do you get in the mood to do your work? And what's your work week like? What's your work day like?
Hmm.
I found out that a lot of manga artists use assistants. I didn't know that. I thought a lot of creators were solo. But yeah, learning all that behind the scenes stuff, speaking as a consumer, for anyone interested, like this magazine to me really sounds like a lot of fun because I love the idea of learning how, like, even seeing pictures of people's, I call them a battle station, right? Oh, how is their monitor set up? How many monitors did they use? What kind of tablet did they use? When you talk about the tools, like even something like when I go to my local art shop and I look around at the types of paper, oh, what do the pros use and why do they select that type of paper? I've
Hmm.
thought about, for instance, just doing a YouTube video, uh, like a half-hour YouTube video, just talking about paper and why it's important. And yeah, I think that's the coolest kind of thing that you can write about and get to know people about. But that sounds like legitimate journalism. Do you have contacts and people working who have journalist backgrounds and that sort of thing?
Some degree. Most of the people that are writing articles at this point are just people that have experience writing, not necessarily journalistic type stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
I would definitely encourage anyone that has a background like that and it sounds good to reach out to us. We would gladly accept any help we can get. We're always looking to expand our team.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, it's mostly fans that know how to write.
Yeah.
We have a lot of questions. We have past issues of Wizard sitting on our desks. I've got one sitting here right now. I was looking through yesterday. Um, I have questions I want answered, and I have a certain way I want to ask them, and so I'm going to go and get those answers the best I possibly can. And if I can try to make a narrative and a cool story out of it, I'm definitely going to try. But some of these people are much better at doing that than I am. So
Mm-hmm.
thankfully, I've got a team of people that can craft that into a better story than me.
One of the uh, biggest challenges, I was reflecting on this the other day. Maybe you can give us some insight. One of the biggest challenges for creators, indie creators, is distribution. And
Mm-hmm.
I've been trying to figure out what are some of the keys to winning as an indie creator, let's say. A magazine like this you mentioned is going to be digital and print on demand, I think, off
Yes.
Amazon.
Yeah.
Do you see a future where that magazine might be sold in stores, local comic shops? And do you think that indie creators can develop relationships with LCSs, or what kind of bridges can be built, you think?
I absolutely think that indie creators can build those bridges. I mean, you mentioned Bone, Jeff Smith, doing just that. There are still LCSs out there. There's still, especially if you shopped at an LCS for a long time, you can walk in there, you can talk to the guy and say, "Hey, I've got a book coming out, and would you be interested in having a few copies?" Even if they don't buy them from you necessarily,
Mm-hmm.
you just want to sell them in his store. Maybe work out a deal with him to, here you can get like 80% or something like that. I mean, whatever you feel comfortable being able to give him or her. But yeah, go in and just ask. I mean, the worst anybody can say is no, right?
Yeah.
So why not go for it? With Insider, I would love to have it go into stores. I can guarantee the first issue is not going to go into stores unless somebody is really, really excited about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I will gladly, if somebody wants to buy a bunch of them and put them in their store, hey, let's talk. Maybe we can give you a better deal.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, I'm more concerned about just getting it out there, kind of advertising stuff and getting a feel for it. And if people like what we're doing here over the next issue or two, I think we're going to try to do these quarterly just because it's a lot of work to pull this together. Um, if the response is good, I will gladly consider, going full scale with production and distribution and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there's a lot more money to be made by printing them on our own and then distributing them rather than going print on demand through Amazon or somebody. But it's not about the money right now. It's about getting the message out and building something kind of fun and getting creators to get some more exposure.
Mm-hmm. That touches on a subject that has been on my mind lately: is how can the community be more healthy? I know that one of the objections to Insider, or maybe Indicron recently, not to name names or anything, is that you guys were mentioning that you want to you basically want to invite everybody. Do you think that's the way to go forward? And what's the best way to include everybody without, I guess, upsetting people at the same time?
It's a double-edged sword, right? You close it off and you say I'm going to serve a specific market, and you're called a gatekeeper.
Yeah.
You're called anti-competitive. You decide that you're going to open your doors, and now you're patronizing with the or fraternizing rather with the enemy. You're being friendly to the bad guys. Blah blah blah. The reason that we decided to open up Indicron, and for those people that aren't familiar with Comicsgate specifically, Indicron had changed a few months back. God, it seems like it's a lifetime ago already, but I think it was back in February. We had said we were going to focus on Comicsgate books only. And at the time, it was because no news outlet was really providing coverage for these books. Nobody was giving them the time of day. And we wanted to be a source where people could find specifically CG books. As we monitored the website and watched creators getting exposure and watched these crowdfunding campaigns start to slow down, we realized that we were dealing with a very small market of indie, and we couldn't drive enough traffic. We needed to do something to be able to get more people onto the site, to be able to get more excitement around these books. And between that and internal politics that were going on inside of Comicsgate, we were like, okay, we need to open this up. We can't be the police anymore that says this book is CG, this book isn't CG, because that was causing all kinds of fighting too.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to be the police. We don't have the time to be the police. We want to be the people, the cheerleaders. We want to be the ones saying, hey, go check out this book. This is a great book. Here's the artwork for it. Here's all this information about it. Here's where you can buy it.
Yeah.
And the more we spend time doing that, and the less we spend time policing people, people are adults, and let's be real about this. You know what you like. You know that you can do a little bit of research about a creator really easily. It's the internet. I mean, hop online, do a couple of searches, you'll find information about that person. If you like their politics, you don't like their politics. If they're a dog owner, but you hate dogs, you love cats, whatever the case may be, that's your prerogative and that's your interpretation of what you like. I can't tell everybody what they can and can't like. So we decided that we were going to open it up and try to pull more people in.
Mhm.
It allows us to promote other stuff like Alterna, which again I praise Peter Samedi a lot, and I have nothing but good things to say about him and his company. But the change here has allowed us to promote other books that are just as good as what was being created in Comicsgate, but also drawn a lot more audience. And as soon as we made that change, within days, our traffic has doubled,
Mhm.
and it's continuing to grow. And I think it was the right decision to make.
I suppose the whole reason why CG formed in the first place was to combat the divisiveness in the comics industry. For instance, speaking for myself, I couldn't tell if it was because of my politics or something like that. I never made it a big deal, but I knew that certain publishers just were not interested in talking to people like me. And it was very hard unless you were already friends with certain editors. Let's say if you made friends with them, how do I put this? When you meet people at conventions and you try to, buddy buddy and all that stuff, a lot of books get made because a creator will talk to an editor and they'll go out for dinner or something and they'll talk about whatever, talk about life. And then they'll be like, oh, yeah, we're buddies, right? Let's make a book sometime.
Mhm.
And I was realizing that somebody in my position, not being, let's say, of the disposition as many editors and publishers are these days, I didn't have a chance with most publishers, so I had to break out on my own. I suppose I'm trying to formulate this into a question. There was talk for a little while that it was becoming closed and you said the word gatekeeping, for instance, discerning who believes what and let's only allow our side into the website. I appreciate the opening up of. See, I'm really struggling to formulate this question. What am I trying to say exactly? I, for instance, I know a lot of webcomics creators who might want to put out a book at some point, and I'm sure that in this new version of IndieCron and Insider as well, they might want to indulge in having profiles done for them and getting the word out there. It sounds like it's going to be filling the vacuum in the it's do you would you agree then that there's a vacuum in the industry for something like this that does not even bother discerning what is a person's politics? Like, let's say even if they're a far left jerk, like, do you guys still want to try and invite them and solicit them?
Right, and that's been a bit of a debate, right? Do you have to believe in the person's politics and their religious beliefs or whatever that may be to able to support their books? If the books are good, and yeah, the person may be an a-hole,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I think a person, again, it comes down to not policing other people's ideas, right? Uh, you don't have to buy that book. You don't have to, out of any obligation to a movement or anything like that, buy that person's book. If the title is good and the artwork's awesome and things like that, but the person just really annoys you, don't buy the book. Don't support it. That's your right as a consumer to spend money and support what you want to so uh, I'm torn, and I think a lot of it's going to wind up coming down to whether or not they even want to be associated with the other people that are on our site.
Mm-hmm.
But like, there's been a lot of argument recently, like, oh, you're going to let this person on, and you're going to let that person on. Yeah, we may let that person on, but gosh, sorry, I'm just reflecting on the past week because it's been nonstop attacks on how we wanted to approach things. But one of the biggest arguments people have made is that being listed on our site alongside somebody else that they may not agree with or may have insulted them in the past is somehow now making them associated with one another.
Mm-hmm.
And my biggest feeling or argument against that is your book is listed alongside with them on Indiegogo. or on Kickstarter. So what's the difference between being listed on our site versus being listed on that site?
Mm-hmm.
The consumer is still going to buy one book or the other one, or maybe both. But just being listed on that kind of site is not a endorsement from you for them, or vice versa.
Hmm. I suppose it strikes me as an impulse to control things, because you and somebody like Edwin, for instance, are so receptive to comments and requests, and you guys are very easy to get a hold of on Twitter, for instance. Maybe people feel like, oh, the buck can stop here and say like, oh, don't invite this person, please. Whereas you can't contact Indiegogo as easily.
Yeah.
Um, but I agree with you. I think true neutrality, for for what it's worth, and as much as we can reach for, without being omniscient. Just let pretty much everyone on. I agree with this, and let the customers decide. I don't like the idea of, for instance, like when I recently this past weekend when I said I'm not CG anymore. What I really meant was I just don't want the name to be like a burden that I have to carry around because of other people's misbehavior. But some of my readers contacted me and they said, "Does that mean you don't want to talk to anyone in CG anymore?" And I was thinking, no, of course not. Why would you think that? I was very surprised to think that there is this kind of knee-jerk reaction, this almost worry that I'm suddenly not going to be the same person that I was 2 days ago, just because I don't want this name on my resume anymore. Um,
Yeah. That has been one of the biggest hurdles I've seen for a lot of people lately. And I don't know exactly what's driving that.
mm,
I think I think it's just the culture that has been fostered, given the way that everything has been handled over the past year. Um, the the tenets of Comicsgate, from the way that I understand them, is that consumers were upset with the way that creators were changing and destroying comics industry. Diversity hiring without any skill level associated with it, the destruction of core characters, changing the way that they acted, and um, just a lot of disrespect to the industry as a whole.
mhm,
And they were fed up with giving their money to this and the predatory practices of those publishers. The more creator centric side of that were the conservative creators coming in and being pushed out of that industry for their beliefs and for the way that they talked. A couple of people were pushed out for voting for Trump, for instance.
right.
And so they came and adopted CG and made it their banner, and talked about how, that this is our group. We're able to do this. We're able to do all these things, and we want the freedom to express our opinions, etc. But then the arguments now, opening things up to people and stuff, we have become the gatekeepers in some way, right? Uh, we're we're talking about how bad the industry treated people, and how we pushed people out and how we did all this stuff, but then we turn around and we're going to tell people that are not quite the same as us as far as their belief levels, that, oh, I'm sorry, no, you can't come in here. It's a bit of a straw man argument, I will say, because there are plenty of conservative creators and liberal creators and liberal fans and stuff that can consider themselves Comicsgate. But this whole idea that you can be one thing but you can't be the other, or if you're a CG creator, you can't, if you can't define what CG really is, and nobody has been able to give a full definition of it because it's so personal to each person. How can you associate with that necessarily? I don't know. I'm going. I'm kind of, my brain's a little bit scattered. This, I kind of went off on a tangent, but ultimately, it's you've got a lot of people that have their own opinions on what this thing is, and you can't make everybody happy,
Mhm.
but you can do the best that you can do based on your beliefs. And so, backing away from CG because you don't like the way that it currently feels, the certain people within it are doing bad things that you don't agree with, and you'd rather just be an indie creator. That doesn't, like you said, it doesn't mean that you don't like those people. that are supporters of it. Doesn't mean you want to separate from those people. You just want to be able to not have to carry a label that's been associated with certain groups that may not be as savory as others. You'd rather stand up for yourself and and represent yourself, and not have to worry about representing a huge other group. I get that.
Yeah, even the group dynamics of, say, I mean, I've always only been able to control my own life, and I can barely control my own life sometimes. So
Right.
I don't know how I can control or have a vote in a community or several communities where we're trying to decide what's the next step, what are we going to do as a group, and I just can't. I don't have the bandwidth anymore to worry about what other people are doing, who's fighting who this week. I just can't stand it. So, and really, I mean, speaking for myself only, I'm so focused on my own projects and my own campaigns that I just do not have time uh, to worry about interpersonal or politics stuff. Like, my only interest, really, and I know this sounds terrible, I just want to sell books. And not even in a necessarily greedy way, but like this is something I have wanted to do for a living for decades. And the only way I can do that is to be friendly to as many people as humanly possible. And that does not include allowing people to speak for me if I disagree with them. I don't like the idea of all this splitting up and saying, oh, we're going to talk to these people and not these people. And I have friends on all kinds of, they believe all kinds of things, especially in the webcomics circle, let's say. There's people who believe all sorts of things, and you got a lot of left-leaning people, a bunch of right-leaning people, and the only thing that really matters to me is, are their strips funny? Um,
Yeah.
that's all I care about. And of course, when it comes to comic books, all I care about is this book good? Is this something that I would want to keep in my library? Like, frankly, like I was using this as an example. I disagree with Alan Moore about a lot of things, I'm sure, but I have a permanent space for Watchmen in my collection, and I don't care what his personal life is like. That's a darn good book. I want to keep it forever.
Yep.
And let's say that there's a Watchman in the indie world but we just don't know that this person exists because it's such a small community. I need to be able to find that book without searching for 200 hours. What's that book? Like Blankets by Craig Thompson, for example, or any number of indie books. Let's say I want to make sure that to cultivate the atmosphere of this new little circle that we have here, this community, whatever. I want those masterpieces to come. I want a creator or several creators to be able to come and find this fertile soil to be able to make their masterpieces. And we can't get there if we're always worrying about, what does this person believe? And being able to speak on behalf of consumers. Don't talk to this person because they are X. That is not my business. That's nobody's business.
Yep. Yeah.
Anyway, feel free to go ahead.
Oh no, it's you're absolutely right. The big argument recently was, if you are a creator, are you part of Comicsgate? Um, and the more that people discuss stuff and more it comes to light with the way that things have been handled, I think certain people will say yes, absolutely, but I think that creators need to not necessarily be quote Comicsgate or quote whatever. You need to focus on creating the best product you can to serve your audience. If your audience is Comicsgate or your audience is mainstream or whatever it may be, that's purely up to them. They can create their associations. They can create their groups and clubs and fandoms, as you will. Your goal as a creator is to create the best possible product for your fans.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if it's a political thing, then you do your thing. You'll have an audience. You'll probably be a smaller audience, but you'll have a thing. But don't you don't need to control your fans. You don't need to control any narratives. You need to create your stuff and put it out there and let people judge it on its merits.
Mm-hmm. I remember a funny story. I can't remember where it was. Maybe Ireland or something. There was a lot of fighting between Catholics and Protestants at one point, and this journalist or somebody was traveling through the country, and he got stopped on the side of the road by this gang of guys. And he's like, "What side are you on, Catholic or Protestant?" And he says, "Oh, I'm an atheist." And the gang of guys talk to each other, and he goes, "Are you a Catholic atheist or a Protestant atheist?" and, and it's just he's just an outsider, and he's traveling, and he is asking questions. And I thought that I always think of that story when I hear about people picking sides. And it's like it's not a black and white issue. I've talked to so many people, and really, this is not, like you said, we are just trying to make excellent books. Actually, on that note, I'm going to be talking to Peter Samini in a couple of weeks. I think I'm scheduled to, and I would say he's probably, as far as like keeping his hands clean and doing excellent work, he might be the guy. Like he's the chosen one, I think. um,
Yeah, he, in my opinion, he personifies what Stan Lee was for the previous generations.
hmm.
And I know that's putting a lot of weight on Peter's shoulders. I'm sure he doesn't want to hear that, but the way that he has approached the industry, the professionalism that he shows, the fact that he is unwavering in his willingness to thank people for purchasing his product, regardless of what their opinions are and what their political stance is. I respect that tremendously.
I think one of the biggest criticisms of the Marvel and DC thing is that they don't seem to hire on a merit based system, whereas the indie community kind of, well, not always. The word I've been looking at in my notes here is nepotism. And I always think of the perfect example of J.J. Abrams and his son working on the Spider Man book.
Right.
And I'm always thinking like his son, what are his qualifications? How hard has he worked? Like he just got to cut the line, and because he had a famous dad. And one of the beautiful things about the indie scene is kind of like if your book looks good, people will buy it. If it sounds good, if it is good. The big obstacle, I think, is let's say I do one book right now, the first part in a series. I don't know of a lot of books, maybe Jawbreakers. How many books have had like part twos and all that stuff? Are they mostly one shots? Do you know?
Jawbreakers is on number two. Graveyard Shift is on number two. Ferryman is on number two. A lot of these books are still working on number one, but I foresee them having multiple issues coming up. It's just, again, how much. Well, even Lone Star. Lone Star's number two as well. Uh, they have plans for where they want to see their books go,
Mm.
but I do wonder if they're looking a little too far in the future and they really need to focus on the present more. Definitely want to treat them like one shots. The stories can be self-contained and still be able to uh, progress over time. But yeah, I think the way things are currently, especially if you're doing the crowdfunded route, they really need to be self-contained stories.
Hmm. I think I've taken a big risk in that case with my current one. I hope I've been forthright about it with everybody listening, but it is definitely an ongoing series. It ends the episode, it's episodes 1 and 2. It ends on a cliffhanger, and it's a big risk to see like if the next one can't get crowdfunded, I I don't know what I'm gonna do. So I guess it's just a big experiment, but I want to make sure that the industry can support, let's say, ongoing series like Image style. The only benefit to Image is that they had giant investors and huge pockets of money through which to hire their teams.
Yeah,
So I guess each creator has to sort of reach into their pockets and hopefully dig out the money to be able to put out their next book in time. I don't know.
yeah.
It's just a thought that I was thinking about.
The '90s were definitely an interesting scenario because it was a massive boom for comics at that particular time. Speculation was really high. Uh, Plus, you had just the superstars of the industry. They all came together to make their own company. So you had a lot of hype and just expectations and the dynamics of their artwork versus anything that you had seen previously at other companies. You started to see it at Marvel because they were all there, but they cranked the volume to 11 and became rock stars.
I
And
heard. I'm sorry.
oh, good, it's fine. I was just gonna say, because of that rock star mentality and all, I mean, they were making millions of dollars per book.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
In that documentary for Image, I remember seeing, I think it was Rob Liefeld, I can't remember, the young guy. He was on like late night shows doing drawing demonstrations, and they were showing up on like Conan O'Brien and David Letterman and all that stuff. And it
Yeah.
was that popular in MTV. There was an explosive, I think mid to late 90s. Comics looked like it was blowing up. And then I don't know what happened, but in the documentary, they just basically said everyone in Image was infighting and poaching each other's creators. But I don't know. Was there just a crash? Did the bubble pop? Something happened in comics that did damage to it. But I know that the manga industry was just squeezing in by the mid to late 90s and then the early 2000s.
Yeah.
That's when I got into it.
For me, I started seeing stuff come into the U.S. I lived in a really small town though, so I my exposure to foreign stuff like manga and whatnot was very limited. I didn't have that kind of access, so I can't say for certain that that contributed to it. But I can say that uh, a lot of the predatory practices and stuff you see in the industry right now, like printing 15 variant covers for a single issue,
Mm-hmm.
launching with number ones left and right. Uh, a lot of that stuff drove a market full of speculators. And when people realized that these print runs of a million plus copies weren't going to be worth even the price printed on the paper,
Mm-hmm.
it started to crumble. Uh, I
Wow.
go to my LCS right now and I can pick up, like, I picked up Stormwatch. I never read that back in the day, but I went and picked up the pretty much the entire run of Stormwatch for less than $1 per issue. I think it's 25 cents per issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked out with like, I don't know, I think it was the first 20 some odd issues of it. And I haven't actually read all of it yet, but uh, super cheap, super cheap. And those books were, I think, $1.99 a piece, something like that, back in when they first came out. And you'll never see that price for them.
Hmm. And it's just because they lost value sitting on the shelf.
They lost value sitting on the shelf, and there's just too many of them. And that's the biggest part of it is you see the big prices for a lot of these old Marvel books and things is because the paper quality wasn't as good.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't treated as collectibles back when they first came out. They were just treated as entertainment, and they were tossed aside. They were destroyed. They were damaged. Every so often, one that was left in a bookshelf or stacked with a bunch of newspaper or something comes to light, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's in great condition, and there's only 5 of them in existence. This thing's worth thousands and thousands of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
But Spawn number one, which got printed, I don't remember how many millions of copies. uh, I got my first edition of Spawn 1 in a pack at Walmart. It was like a 10 pack of Image Comics. And it just happened to be in there. I'm like, oh, cool, I got Spawn number 1. It was first edition.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how ubiquitous those comics were back then. They were putting them in packs and stuff, even in the 90s, just selling them out for like $5 for a big old pack of books. They're just worth nothing now, unfortunately.
And you think that contributed to part of Image's fall, the oversaturation of titles?
Oversaturation of titles, just huge print runs that wound up leading to nowhere, and just the fact they were blowing money left and right.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's the same thing when you see a sports star get a big contract and then either get injured or whatever, and they completely run out of money because they had a massive entourage. They were spending money without really considering it. Um, the Image guys were blowing through cash. Some of the guys were smart, invested, and kept going, but dates were missed all the time. Books were late. They were getting fined for, I think, by Diamond and stuff for not having stuff on time. And so you add all this stuff up over time, and it starts to drain it.
Mm.
I can't say one thing for sure because I wasn't part of that. I was the consumer sitting there paying $20 for 4 or 5 different covers of a book because I loved the story so much, and I thought, hey, these are going to be worth something someday because I was a kid. I didn't know any better.
Right.
But yeah, I think at some point, it just, the market collapsed. Whatever it was, the collectors got tired of it. and the market went away.
Hmm.
And there were a lot of contributing factors to it, but it's hard to point out one specific thing. But it's clear that a lot of these guys didn't plan for it ever to end.
I see. I see. Or plan for recession, let's say.
Yeah,
There's once the bubble pops and you have too much overhead. It's like even a month in the red will like take you down pretty hard.
yeah,
That's one of the good things of being an indie creator, I would say. Especially, I'm spoiled because I don't have a creative team, so it's just me. I don't have to worry about things like paying my artist, for instance. I can theoretically just live on ramen noodles if I have to. But that's one of the things I pity of like a writer, say, working with an artist, where one or the other of them has to earn a living somehow and find the time to produce these comics. And even at a page a day, like that's my goal right now with my book is I want to try to do a page a day when it comes time to do full-time production. Even then, getting the book out to the printer, you have to have, I would say it's about a month turnaround time between me sending the PDF to the printer and then them shipping it to me. And then, of course, I'm sending the books over to the, actual customers. You could see like the book can be done, and then a month or 2 months later, that's when it gets actually in the hands of the customer.
yeah,
By that point, if something goes wrong, you may be facing it like you may not get any income for 2 months, maybe, if you're lucky. So you have to be ready for that.
yeah. At the very least, and really, the best thing to do would be to have like 2 or 3 issues in the can already before you ever start trying to crowdfund, and
Yeah.
that's kind of scary as far as financial investment and something like that. If you are not the artist like you, uh,
Right.
yeah, it's a lot to do.
Yeah,
Uh,
very expensive, shockingly expensive.
yeah,
I don't think. I don't know. I mean, that's something that would actually be a lot of fun to interview different creators for the magazine. I would be interested in hearing what they think and just the everyday. Like, is it a very Spartan lifestyle? How do you go day to day? And I
yeah,
don't know.
absolutely.
I'd love to hear that stuff.
Yeah, I definitely want to do that too. And one of the other things I'm really looking forward to is this thing I'm calling post mortem,
Hmm.
which is taking a look at a campaign, actually multiple campaigns from a similar genre, and seeing what worked, what didn't work, marketing efforts. Where did you put your time and effort into promoting the book? Who did you print with? How did you handle distribution?
Hmm.
What were your perks? What was your price range? All these kind of things, and compile a kind of median to figure out. Okay, these are the things that, as a indie creator working on a superhero book, blah blah blah. This is what you need to do, or this is what worked previously, and this is probably where you want to fall into a similar line.
Uh-huh.
And then we can also say, but please, whatever you do, for God's sake, do not do this. Do not sell these shirts. Do not do this. Whatever.
Yeah.
Be able to give them don't waste your time over on Minds or something like that, right? Or Gab. I mean, those platforms are growing, but probably little return, right? Versus maybe advertising on Instagram or Facebook or something like that.
Hmm.
We just want to get those details and be able to compile them into an accurate, a wider view, I guess is a good way to put it, and be able to help people focus their efforts.
Hmm. Yeah, it all. I would be very interested to hear how other creators are handling things like little merch. For instance, me and my wife actually are doing our own merch from home, like things like T-shirts.
Mm-hmm.
I was lucky enough that she's like a genius when it comes to putting together things like. She introduced me to something called, well, it's like a type of vinyl that you can cut out on a certain machine, and you can cut out patterns and iron them onto shirts, and it looks 100% professional.
Oh, nice.
All kinds of different little products and goodies, like things like trading cards. I could print that from home because I used to work as a printmaker. So it occurred to me like, oh, I could just buy this $400 printer, and then it's not a lot of money, and the paper's kind of expensive, and the ink is expensive. But people like the little trading cards. I can print my own posters at home, and in the long run, it will pay for itself. So these are the kinds of things that I think creators can share with each other and say like, oh, you can do this, and add a few, add some extra value to like the premium editions, or like I have my $100 tier with all these like little goodies, and I can make them all at home. These are great little nuggets to share with each other, I suppose.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know more about the card printing thing for sure.
Oh
Just
yeah.
because, well, my upcoming campaign that's probably launching tomorrow is going to be strictly cards, uh, and so
Oh,
that'd be kind of something that'd be fun to talk about more.
sure.
But
I could tell you offline or on. I mean, the basic idea is that there are these. They're called G clay printers.
mhm.
I don't know if anyone is aware. Like CMYK printing is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Have you heard of this?
I've never heard of a G Clay printer. No.
Okay, well, I don't know if it's officially called that, but when I used to be a printmaker, that's what it was called. Basically, it meant is that it's an inkjet printer, but it uses more than just the four colors. It uses 8 colors or 12 colors,
I see.
and it makes them just more vibrant, all the colors. And it's an inkjet type of printer, so it's going to be very, very expensive. But the print quality is unmatchable. You can't achieve those kinds of colors on laser, but it's not really built for mass production. So I bought one of these printers, and because I used to use them, it's not that hard to use. And then I end up printing. We've been trying out different experiment. Well, we've been experimenting with different papers, like let's say premium photo paper that you could print family photos on.
Mhm.
Very rich colors. The texture is amazing. They really feel like trading cards. And then on top of that, my wife and I were experimenting with things like gold foil that you could actually cut out and iron onto the cards and create your own chromium patterns. And if you add gold foil to a trading card, let's say, it looks like a gold trading card. And on top of that, you can run them through a laminating machine and take the one layer off, and it looks really glossy, gorgeous. And I don't know, I'm not a numbers guy. Like, it sounds like you're a huge data guy. But I haven't run the numbers, but I would say in the end, it is profitable doing it from home. And in the long run, it'll be exceptionally profitable because I can just do 100 cards at a time, put them all in a box, and, for instance, give people random cards to say, okay, you're a backer, here's a card. Or you're a super backer, here's a gold foil card. So I'm sure if you're running a project for card stuff, I can give you all kinds of inside info. But it's very affordable, surprisingly affordable to do it from home these days, if you're a graphics person at least.
Yeah. Hmm. Okay, it's good to know. Yeah,
Yeah,
we can talk more about it offline. I'd be curious, but
sure.
what I've done so far is I've printed through a couple different card printing companies, and I've liked the results, and the pricing has been fairly good. But uh, one of the big things I wanted to do, and unfortunately I'm not going to be able to do it with this campaign, I think, is actual like foil packs or the wax packs that you get from the store, where you're actually able to crack it open and you've got the nice store bought professional effect there. But that was like tripling the cost of the project,
Hmm.
and I just couldn't. I ran a actually ran a poll for people. I asked them, would you prefer that type of presentation, or do you want more, as far as like cards or whatever?
I see.
And the overwhelming majority was, we want more cards. We don't necessarily need to have the fancy wrapping. So I'm going that route. I'm gonna have stretch goals for extra cards, but I'm going to use a standard shrink wrap machine, and I'll print one card, which is basically the label for the package, which will also be the checklist on the backside.
Hmm.
And I'll just do individual cut, heat shrink wrapped packs of cards, and that's how the things are going to go out.
Hmm. Yeah, there was a similar thing that I actually landed on. I was at a flea market of all places, and there was a woman selling little cards for like magic cards or what do you call them? They look like Ziploc bags,
Sleeves.
Oh,
sleeves,
yeah,
right? Yeah, they were like for baseball cards and magic cards. And I'm like, oh, why don't I just put cards in these? Like, if someone orders a pack of 5, it still looks nice. You open it, they look
yeah.
preserved, right? And there's also, I don't know if this is part of your project. I want to ask about that before we go. At an art store, my local art store, they sell something called, like, they're really thick boards, but they're the size of cards that, like artist trading cards, you're supposed to draw on them
Mhm.
and trade them. And if you attach a trading card to that, it looks like super premium. Um, I don't know. I just thought that might be another thing to add to your project. But we could talk about that off air. But now that you mentioned the project, what is the project? Or you're not talking about it yet?
Oh no, it's fine. I mean, it's launching tomorrow, so
Okay.
it's Cover Crashers is the name of it. Covercrashers.com, and what it is over the past year of working with all these different creators and promoting their campaigns and stuff. I noticed that one of the funny parts about all these guys knowing each other and interacting with each other is there's a lot of humor and joking and ribbing going on, and I wanted to kind of take my step into playing around with the guys and poking fun at them. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with Wacky Packs, or maybe Garbage Pail Kids might be something you're more familiar with. But
I have heard of Garbage Pail Kids.
okay, so Garbage Pail Kids came after Wacky Packs or Wacky Packages, but during the '70s, and I think they came out again a few years back. But what they would do is they were created by the Tops Company, and they were stickers very similar to Garbage Pail Kids, but they featured recreations of different brands, but like gross versions of them or funny versions of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like Tums, for instance, might be something like bums, and it's got like butts or something like that. There's just all these really gross kind of fun cards. Ajax, I can't remember what it was. It was like AWAX or something. I don't remember. It just
Dr. Pooper, I've seen.
exactly.
Okay.
All of these different types of things where they would take the name, tweak the logo, but still it was a homage slash jab at those particular companies. So
That's funny.
what I did is I took the brands from these different crowdfunding campaigns, like Cyberfrog. I made a card for Cyberlog. Bigfoot Bill, I made one called Big Mouth Bill. And part of the fun of the Big Mouth Bill is because Doug was getting a lot of hard time and stuff for running his mouth a lot. But he was the one that actually suggested Big Mouth Bill. That's the funny part about it. People may not know this. He's the one that actually gave me the idea for the card. Because he was fully in. As soon as he saw Cyberlog, he was like, "Yes, we got to do this." He goes, "You got to do one of me." And I'm like, "Okay, well, I'm working on it." And he's like, "No, it's got to be Big Mouth Bill." I'm like, "I like that. Let's work with that."
And
So
the illustrations, are they going to be original or?
all of the illustrations are original. They're all so. My original goal was recreate the logos first, and I've tried very hard to get the same fonts and match the look and feel, and I think I've done pretty good for the most part. Matching each one of the logos as best I possibly can, just with the slight tweak for the naming. And then from that point, I try to, for most of the cards at least, I've tried to copy the art style to some degree. Some of it's been more successful than others, but for the most part, I've kind of gotten at least the feel of the artwork to match up. Like my favorite one so far is making fun of Brutus the Badass, which was done by Donald DeLay. I did one called Brutus the Half-Ass, and it's based on the original art. Oops, hold on, my phone's going off here. It's based on the kind of Simon Bisley style painted cover that was presented for the book at one point, and so I've got this kind of really grungy type artwork, and I love that one. It's one of my favorites of the set, but each one of these it's challenging me because I don't know the styles, or I haven't really drawn like that. My style, I'm still kind of evolving and growing as an artist, and so presented with the chance to try to copy these styles, I have to learn new techniques, right? I have to play with my tool sets in ways that I never had done before, and so it's a really cool growth experience for me at the same time as building something kind of cool. And so what I've got right now is I have 9 main cards in the set, which cover a number of campaigns. There's been a ton of other campaigns I've wanted to cover, but I've limited it to the 9 for now. I have one promo card currently, which is for my book, Critical Snail, which I'm hoping I can start next year. And then I have 2 promo slots, which I'm going to allow the person to choose whether they want to do a legitimate promo, like what my Critical Snail is, or if they want to get crashed. And if they want to get crashed, I'll do a knockoff brand kind of thing like I did with the other ones for them. But those are going to be premium priced, so that I'm not sure exactly how much I'm charging yet. I got to get that figured out today. But those cards will be included in the set for promotion for their book, and they'll get the original artwork. So I'll wind up doing the pencils on a standard card or a Bristol or something, and then they'll get the original for that. Nice. And then I'll probably wind up doing inks and colors and stuff digitally, but they'll get the original pencils and stuff from me.
Very fancy.
Yeah, and so all of that's going to lead into, if I fund, which I hope I do. I don't know. I'm not sure what the market's like, but people seem to like it. Uh, every $500 or so, I'm going to add an extra card to the set, up to having a total of 18 cards.
Hmm.
So I've got about 7 of them done right now. So we'll see how it funds. It may take me a while to finish all the cards, but I plan to get them all out by the end of the year if it funds. And I
That's
think
a really fun idea.
yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and I'm hoping, uh, the money itself. I mean, I don't know how much it's actually going to make. If it blows up and people love it, I'm going to be really, really happy. And the best part about it is it's going to help me be able to work on Critical Snail,
Mhm.
because I'll be able to hire a colorist, because I can color okay, but I would prefer to have somebody else color my work because I know my limits, and that's not where I really shine.
Mhm.
But it'll help me get the preview of that book out and get prepared to be able to produce something like that, and get out to people. But I just want to try to make something kind of fun, and get it out there and see what happens.
And it's launching tomorrow, so I'm very curious to see. I'm going to try to upload this video tonight, but if anyone listens to it by tomorrow, the 2nd of August, it will have launched, so be sure to look for it.
Yep, covercrashers.com. I'm going to be redirecting it to the campaign as of tomorrow morning, probably.
Very nice. Well, I'll be keeping an eye on that for sure.
Awesome.
Let's see. One more question that I always try to ask is, do you think there will ever be a sort of convention where everybody that we know will get to meet each other? Do you think that's a realistic hope?
That's a good question. No.
Hmm.
Realistically, no, just because of logistics and financial restrictions. I think the closest thing that we can get to that is what we currently do, is where we get people together online. We're in chat rooms, we're interacting with each other, we're streaming.
Hmm.
That's the closest thing to that type of environment. Uh, People can save money and they can go to local rural cons and things like that. Going to Comic Con in San Diego, I'm blessed because I live in San Diego, so I don't really have to travel or worry about lodging. And so I was able to meet with a lot of people that came into town. Billy Tucci, Doug Knaple, and a few others. Um, I got that opportunity because I live here, but uh, traveling across the country to be able to get people on the East Coast out here, like Peter Samedi, I would love to meet him,
Yeah,
but I don't know if I'm going to be able to ever have a chance to travel all the way across to to the East Coast specifically just to go to a con to meet him in person.
sure.
I think, what would be really kind of cool is in the future if we were to have some kind of like VR convention where you can go in, you've got your avatars. I mean, everybody has avatars already anyway, right? And then we're running around on Twitter and stuff. Um, but if we had like a virtual convention center that we could all go to and hang out and talk and shake hands digitally, whatever.
What was that game, PlayStation Life? There was like The Sims sort of. I
I
don't
don't
remember.
recall. I know Second Life was out for.
Maybe something like that.
Second Life would be one of those kind of things, but it would be kind of interesting, even if it wasn't VR. If it was just like I don't know, like a Minecraft server, we all
Well,
we all got on and hung out.
World of Warcraft Vanilla is coming out again, so let's all join the same server.
Oh, let's do it. We'll start a raid,
But
and
we'll have no time to actually work on our books. We'll just play WoW.
yeah, Indie Comics Guild. I'm down.
I'm gonna try to think about that. I don't know. I'm vaguely like, oh, I'll make a character, but then I'm like, no, no, no. I'm an adult now. I can't do that again. Uh,
I invested far too much time into World of Warcraft.
yeah,
I
man.
remember one day I did a slash played for my first character, and it was over a year of game time. And I looked at it for a minute and said, "What did I do with my life?" I had a full year in a game where I could have built a comic. I could have
I know.
changed my career. Done. There's so much I could have done,
I know.
and instead I was smacking kobolds with a hammer.
Oh, you were a paladin, were you?
I was a paladin. Well, I was a hunter first, though. But yeah, my primary class, I switched around between a lot of them. I went from hunter to warlock, and then from warlock to paladin, and I played a prop paladin for pretty much the last 4 or 5 expansions.
Nice, man. You see, I
Yeah.
think that's why we get along. I was also a paladin.
Okay. I loved PVEing. Sorry, PvPing as prot too, because I would walk in, and if I had a priest on me, I could dive into a group of like 4 or 5 guys, and they'd be smacking the hell out of me, and there was nothing they could do.
Yeah, I like that feeling. I hate respawning. I just like the feeling of not being able to die.
Yeah,
I,
yeah, exactly.
I was always joking with myself, though. I have the personality. I don't know how many years ago I would say this. I act like a rogue, but I behave like a paladin, which
Okay.
which means I have no HP, but I try to like bravely run at people,
Oh man,
and I get taken out real fast.
I was
Um,
I was a terrible rogue.
that's
I
funny.
could yeah, I couldn't play rogues very well, unless I was playing a twink rogue. Then I was fine
Hmm.
because it was
Yeah, that's going to be a difficult siren call to resist. When
yeah.
I think it's actually this August, isn't it? They're going to be re-releasing it.
I had access to the beta too, and I just decided not to do it. I knew what it was going to do to me,
It's
so
dangerous, yeah.
I stayed away.
That's wise. I knew guys who were legitimately addicted. Well, they were in their early 20s, so I guess they could afford it. But anyway, we could talk about that offline.
Yep.
All right, so everybody listening, plug your projects one more time so we can follow you.
Okay, sure. So again, I'm Pixel Trader. So Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all Pixel Trader, Pixel Traitor, Traitor. Uh, I do some streams sometimes. I'm not very consistent, but I currently have a crowdfunding campaign launching August 2nd, which is called Cover Crashers. I also run a website called Indiecron. It's INDIECRON.com, where I work with a team of people to create a list of independent comic creators and their books. And then through that, with a few other creators, I'm working on Insider, which is hopefully tomorrow or Saturday. Actually, the website will go live, but they can find that through Indiecron as well once we start linking out to it. But that's about it. I thank you for the time today. It was awesome.
It's my pleasure. You're a really nice guy. You got in touch with me very early on when I joined up with everybody. It's really encouraging to see what you guys are building with this, and I really think between you guys and Peter Samiti, like this is the future. We just have to keep the momentum going. So I really am going to be keeping an eye on your guys' project, and I want to help out as much as I can.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah. All right, so everyone listening, this has been Pixel Trader. I have a bunch of interviews coming up, but especially Peter Samiti, so keep an eye out for that. Mary Sue is still going. There's about 27 days left. If you have not already, give it a look. We'll see. We'll see. We've been talking about indie comics, and it has been already funded, but it can get further funded, and that might help with future issues. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, thanks everyone for listening. I will see you next time. I don't have an outro, so there you go. Casting my magic spell. Goodbye. I'm going to hit stop here.